All right, hopefully we're back. Sorry about that. Looks like we had a little freezing going on here on the screen, and I'm not really sure what happened with that, but I apologize. So we'll pick up now where we kind of left off. We were talking about giving, about tithing. Tithing is um, absolutely for today. The purpose of the tithe, as we talked about last week, was to perpetuate the teaching of Torah amongst the people. If you have a question about that, you can always email us and we'll try to help you understand that. It's a lot of mis-teaching out there and so on and so forth. So it says the name of the parashah Vayakhel means and he assembled. This refers to how Moses assembled the people when he came down from Mount Sinai to transmit God's command to build the tabernacle. Assembling it is not merely collecting or gathering it, but rather it signifies bringing together disparate entities to form a collective whole. This is the beauty of community. The community is about bringing together different types of people to form a collective whole. You know, the Rebbe is fond of talking about this, that if you happen to come into the community and you see something that's not being done or needs to be done, or some position that needs to be filled, or some role that needs to be filled, or something like that, there's a tendency sometimes for us to be critical and to say, well, these people should be doing this, or et cetera, but they're not, and they can't believe they're not, and et cetera, et cetera. And we should resist that, because the reality is that the reason why oftentimes we've been sent to said community is to be the person who fills that gap. And we should recognize that if we're somewhere and there's something that's not being done that needs to be done in our minds, then, leadership should be approached, and visions should be cast. And very often you'll find that the leadership is aware of these gaps, but there just hasn't been anybody with that gifting or that motivation to fill the gap. And so they're praying and waiting for the right person to be brought to the community to do that, and it just happens to be it's you. So it's a joy. So it goes on to say in this commentary, Moses had to assemble the people when he transmitted these commands, since the people had to build the tabernacle as a collective whole, not as individuals. That's another beautiful idea. By the way, this isn't something else, just to kind of connect this back to the beautiful mitzvah of tithing, which is, as I said, absolutely for today. We value tithing here in Lapid Judaism. Absolutely. But one of the reasons why tithing is so beautiful is because it makes us part of a collective whole. The old adage is often said that if you really want to see where somebody's heart is, what they value and what they appreciate, all one need do is explore their checkbook to see where those funds, so to speak, are being spent. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that we could do, is to really check ourselves, so to speak. Where are our values? And we can see that if we really pay attention, we'll see where those are. So it says here, the tabernacle's purpose was to enable God's presence to dwell among the entirety of the Jewish people. So in order to fulfill this role, the wealth and materials that the people donated had to become community wealth. Boy, there's another correlation there. Now, let me go back and reread this thing, because we've been talking about this, right, from the standpoint of donations and so on, tithing. Why is it important? It says, in order to fulfill the role. Now, what's the role? Let me go back and read that first, that other sentence. The tabernacle's purpose was to enable God's presence to dwell among the entirety of the Jewish people. In order to fulfill this role, the wealth and materials that the people donated had to become community wealth, which meant that the people had to be assembled into a cohesive unit. What this is really talking about is that our community involvement has to be complete, meaning that it can't just be uh, us as individuals in our spiritual endeavors, but it has to be also with our financial endeavors as well. So our wealth, as it were, becomes, in addition to our physical ability, becomes part of the whole package. So in other words, we're actually become part of the community through our tithing. We become part of the community through our serving, through our prayer. You see, it's a whole package. This is why this parashah begins talking about the importance of the people coming together and contributing in totality to everything. So initially here we're talking about the contribution that would open up the opportunity to even create the tabernacle. And then later on, the giving is all about supporting the work of the ministry, the work of the tabernacle, the work of the Levites. What did the Levites do? We talked about this last week. The Levites were the ones who were out there basically ministering to the people, which is why they were supported in such a way. It wasn't, as we said, it wasn't to support the work of the tabernacle. It was to support the work of ministry. So a couple more insights here as we wrap it up, just to kind of quote from this beginning part here. This says the entire assembly of the children of Israel. So it says, while the other mitzvot were affected by the sin of the golden calf, the Sabbath, to which Moses now adds new instructions, had not been tarnished. This is an interesting insight. So consequently, when the tablets were destroyed, the letters making up the commandments of the Shabbat remained intact, while the other letters fled. That, notes Rabbi Avraham Mordecai of Gur, is why the Sabbath prayer includes the phrase on which the tablets is inscribed the observance of the Shabbat. So the only letters that retained their original status were those regarding the Shabbat. So immediately after the people were forgiven, Moses informed them that this forgiveness was due in part to their observance of the Sabbath. Thus, he provided them with an additional reason for preserving the Sabbath as a real treasure in the future. So we see here an interesting point that that the Sabbath is actually an element of teshuvah. So every time we enter the Shabbat, we are actually entering into a dimension, if you will, of teshuvah. And I started out this program by talking about people who don't really, they don't make the Shabbat a priority. If something comes up, then it'll trump the Sabbath, whether it be work or something like that. And I really, and I know there's a lot of people watch this program that are striving to get their life in a situation in which they are able to keep the Sabbath and able to keep the Yom Tov. And I totally get that. All I'm trying to do is simply encourage you towards that goal, because it is important. And it's important for a lot of really deep spiritual reasons. And it says here, the Zohar notes that the Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, who joined Israel upon their redemption from Egypt, had turned their backs on the Sabbath after they heard the words, between me and the children of Israel. So they felt excluded, and they searched for their own leader and idol, and ultimately worshiped the golden calf. But understand this, is that what it's saying in that particular comment there is that their failure began with their failure to really properly appreciate the Sabbath. And that's what ultimately led to their downfall. And so when it comes to Shabbat and Yom Tovim, I want to encourage all of you to be sure and make it a priority in your life and do what's necessary to um, make sure that you're always observing and keeping these holidays and refraining from work and so on and so forth. We'll talk more about this tomorrow and talk. We'll mention. I told you we were going to get to that. Mention about kindling the fire. We'll talk about that as well. Sorry about the glitch in our program today. That's rarely ever happens, so I'm very sorry about that. So we'll come back tomorrow and begin again, and hopefully we'll be glitch free at that point. So shalom, everybody. Blessings to you. Thank you so much for being with me, and I look forward to being with you tomorrow with God's help. Shalom aleichem.